My name is Marissa, and I am very happy to introduce Dr. David Pitts and Dr. Randall Commissaris, who have agreed to host this afternoon's event on white privilege and systemic racism. I had the honor and privilege of joining David and Randy for one of the Doing Our Own Work sessions for white folks that was hosted by the organization Allies for Change based in Lansing, Michigan, and was brought to Wayne State through the efforts of Dr. Marquita Chambly. So we have an exciting program for you this afternoon. And I had no part of it except for I do want to share some guidelines for sharing before we get started so that we all have a comfortable, well, not necessarily comfortable, that we all have a nice conversation. So the first guideline for sharing I want to bring up is listening carefully and deeply. Second, I would like us to all really share based on our own personal experience, not something that you may have heard from somebody else or secondhand or on social media, etc. I would like everyone to please be cognizant of the time and space that they take up, whether it's taking up too much space or perhaps you haven't staked some space in the conversation. Really importantly, I would like everyone to please honor confidences. And really what is said here stays here. And I just want to let everybody know that after a couple of little media presentations and shares from David and Randy, we're going to stop the recording of this conversation. So the only thing that's going to be recorded are some of the supplemental materials that David and Randy have prepared for this. And adjacent to that, please don't freeze ourselves or other people in time. If someone says something, or if you think something or say something, and after this conversation, you feel type of way about it, or feel uncomfortable or wish, oh, I wish I had said something different, we invite everyone to remind you not to freeze yourself in time and to try and not freeze other people in time. And the last guideline for sharing is to recognize intent versus impact. And an example that I like to give for this is, say it's post-COVID times and I see Janetta and I run up and I'm so excited to see her and I give her a hug, but I also step on her foot at the same time. My intention may have been to give Janetta a hug, but the impact of my actions was that I stepped on her foot. And so even though it wasn't my intention to step on her foot, I need to apologize for the action that resulted from that. And so I'm just going to post these guidelines in the chat so we can all just kind of reference back to them during this conversation. And here, I'll just post it again because a couple of folks joined us. And with that, I am turning it over to Randy and David. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. I think Dave and I have talked about it with Marissa, and I think I'm going to speak first briefly. I have a technical difficulty. Well, first of all, I lost track of time because I was flying a kite with my granddaughter. I'm babysitting out of town, so sorry. Marissa, could you be so kind as to pull up the Google Doc that we had worked with? Because I cannot find it. Thank you all very much. My name is Randy, and you can share that document if you would.
Do you want me to share my screen or just share it with you, Randy?
Share the screen, please.
Okay, yep, will do.
I have a printed version, but it doesn't work very well for the rest of the crowd. And so briefly, and so you can go back, right there is perfect. So what we're going to do, as Marissa said, she shared some guidelines. What we're going to do is I'll walk through a couple definitions of white privilege, and then we're going to do two exercises. One exercise has been called the privilege walk. It's been called Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And we'll walk through that, and there'll be a survey that you'll be invited to take. And then David will briefly introduce a film that can be used to illustrate and teach about white privilege, and we'll then sort of have some kind of discussion in general. So Marissa, if you could please move to the part where it says definitions. Okay, thanks very much. I hope everybody can see that. Basically, this is a talk about white privilege, and so I'm going to offer up basically 4 definitions. Wikipedia, we're academics, we're not supposed to use Wikipedia, but hey, everybody does. Wikipedia says white privilege or white skin privilege is the societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in some societies, particularly if they're otherwise under the same social, political, and economic circumstances. Oxford and Merriam-Webster dictionary provide definitions as well. I'll just read the Merriam-Webster version. The set of social and economic advantages that white people have by virtue of their race in a culture characterized by racial inequality. You can read Ibram Kendi's as well. But essentially, that's what we're going to try to talk about today. Marissa, would you be so kind as to advance a little bit then? Thank you. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what's called by some people the privilege walk. It's also called unpacking the invisible knapsack. The very first time I was exposed to this, it was by an exposure to a presentation, a paper by Peggy McIntosh. It was published in 1989. She is a women's studies scholar. I think it's Smith College, but I'm not sure, somewhere on the East Coast. And just to sort of introduce this, I want to read a couple of quotes from her article. It's a brief article published in 1989. It's been republished many times. So McIntosh writes, "It seemed to me obliviousness about white privilege, like obliviousness about male privilege, is strongly enculturated in the United States so as to maintain the myth of meritocracy, the myth that all democratic choice is equally available to all." Then she goes on to say, "In my class and place, I did not see myself as a racist because I was taught to recognize racism as only individual acts of meanness by members of my group, never as an invisible system or invisible systems conferring unsought racial dominance or preference on my group from birth." And so that's sort of one. Oh, can you keep sharing briefly? Did I lose it? I don't have the screen share. Okay. And so with that as an introduction, sort of a definition of what white privilege is from a couple sources, what I'd like to do is invite everybody to take a brief survey. Marissa is going to send us to this survey briefly. You're going to take the survey anonymously. It's multiple questions. The first page, first question simply asks you to identify, self-identify as a white person or a BIPOC. And from that point, all the questions are the same. What we're going to ask you to do is, I think it's maybe a dozen questions, should take about 5 or maybe 8 minutes, no more. If you would just open that survey, answer those questions, and then when everybody's back, we will move to the second part, which is David's video. And after the video, we will tabulate all the data. This has kind of this is often done obviously in a public kind of an arena, has a much more of a visual when it's done that way. Quite often a group of people will start at a same starting point, say the end line of a gymnasium, and they get to take a step forward if they answer yes. And at the end of the questions, you get to look and see who has gone how far. And that gives you a really, I think, a really good visual perception of what white privilege is. In this case, we're going to do it as a before and after poll. Marissa is going to share the poll results in a few minutes, I should say.
Okay, what I'd like to do next is just introduce everybody to a short film clip I'm going to show. And this is from a longer film called The Color of Fear. It's a film that is from Stir Fry Seminars and Consulting. with Lee Man-Wah as the executive director. So I'm going to read a little bit from the website about the film. This is a diversity training company that provides educational tools and workshops on issues pertaining to cross-cultural communication and awareness, mindful facilitation, and conflict mediation techniques. Lee Man-Wah's most famous film about racism, The Color of Fear, won the gold medal for Best Social Studies Documentary. Part 2 of this film, Walking Each Other Home, won the Cindy Competition Silver Medal for Social Science. In 1995, Oprah Winfrey did a 1-hour special on Lee Man-Wah's life and work that was seen by over 15 million viewers internationally. The Color of Fear is an insightful, groundbreaking film about the state of race relations in America as seen through the eyes of 8 North American men of Asian, European, Latino, and African descent. In a series of intelligent, emotional, and dramatic confrontations, the men reveal the pain and scars that racism has caused them. What emerges is a deeper sense of understanding and trust. This is a dialogue most of us fear but hope will happen sometime in our lifetime. And this was done in 1994. So I think with that, I can share the screen clip.
I'm a local boy, grown, raised right here in this small community. And when the subject of racism was mentioned to me, I found it extremely exciting because I grew up in this area with friends of all races. And we would read in the news, see on the television of racial struggles in other areas and could not comprehend how that could be and why they had to cause struggle and strife for each other. Why couldn't they be just like at home, happy and productive together? And I don't think that anybody should be any less than another. I grew up in this area right alongside the Native Americans, and some of them to this day are my dearest friends, and I like their cultures, yes. And I even seek after artifacts from their history, but there's no struggle or strife if we don't cause it. Do you think that we don't get excited as Americans when you say you are something other than just American? I got excited when Man-Wah said to us, he is Chinese American. Why can't he be just American and excited about being just American like David is?
But wait a minute, I just,
he calls himself an American.
but I'm doing that for a very specific purpose.
Okay.
I'm doing it because I'm turning my identity as American to fight against the white supremacist notion that only white people merit the status of the title of American.
I agree
And
with
I
that.
I refuse to be segregated or to be allocated to a lower status by not being recognized as an American.
I like that attitude, and I think that's a correct and proper attitude. Whereas
I'm also Chinese.
Yes.
I'm very proud of that. And for a person to look at me and say, for a white person to look at me and say, you're just like me, we're both American, totally insults me because it denies my identity as a Chinese person too.
You give us a hard time for being white and being American and being in control. I've never felt in control. I had vineyards and pear orchards for many years, and I employed many of your people, if you wish to call them that. They're my dear friends. To me, they are friends equal to any that I would have. Well, and then I greet them. And now they come into my business and they just want to come in and say hi and talk to me.
Is something different that's happened. What's different that's happened for us, and I'm speaking as a people, borders on genocide, takeover, colonization. You know what happens to me when I pass a mission?
Yeah.
It's not the same thing that happens to every group that passes a mission. There's something different. When I hear Father Una Tercera, what do you think I think of? You know, it's not, it's chopping off hands, it's slavery. I mean, you know, that's what's different. And it gets tiring to not have that difference known. It gets tiring to not have that difference acknowledged and to have to keep talking about it. That's what gets tiring.
So I see here an attitude expressed by Pitaka and by Roberto that says, how can I be an American? I can't. And so I won't. I'm going to cling to my heritage. Is this clinging the problem? Is this belief that you cannot become American the problem? For years, I've said, why do these guys have such a problem being a color? Why can't they just be individuals and go out and make a place for themselves? And I hear you saying that we whites don't allow that we keep you down. Why aren't we just humans? I mean, why aren't we just brothers?
There's a certain sort of silent consciousness about what it means to be American that I sense coming from white folks that I'd like to talk about. But before I do that, I'd like to say one more thing that's hard about talking about racism, and that is that, people of color are spilling their guts and doing education to white people. Let me explain to you how you've got this wrong. Let me explain to you how you've got that wrong. Let me explain. And then we get cross-examined, and it's like, well, maybe your problem is blah, 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 blah. And it's always, racism gets looked at as a person of color's problem, and it's not. We're like on the receiving end of the problem, but we're not the problem. I walk in a world where Black people, where Latinos, where Asians, where Arabs, all these different people are experienced as problem people, and that, well, we're going to deal with the person of color problem, when in fact racism is essentially a white problem. And that for you to understand what racism is about, you're going to be so uncomfortable. You're going to be so different from who you see yourself to be now that there's just no way for you to get it from where you're sitting. And I'm not saying that you could never get it. I mean that you need to step outside of your skin and step outside of what seems really comfortable and familiar to you, and launch out into some real, for you, unknown territory. And you haven't gone out there like you haven't, gotten in proximity to Black people, as you say, because you don't have to. And that's part of what it means to be American, to me, is to have all these things that you can do if you want to, that you don't have to do if you don't want to do. And there's a way in which American and white and human become synonyms. That why can't we just treat each other as human beings? To me, when I hear it from a white person, it means, why can't we all just pretend to be white people? I'll pretend you're a white person, and then you can pretend to be white. Why don't you eat what I eat? Why don't you drink what I drink? Why don't you think like I think? Why don't you feel like I feel? God damn it, I'm so sick and goddamn tired of hearing about that. I'm sick of that. That's what it means to be human being to me. That's what it means to be white. That's what it means to be American. Why don't you come the hell over here? That's what I hear every goddamn day. And you know that I can't come over there. You know that this skin and that this hair and that this way that I talk and that I think and I feel will never, ever get to this goddamn nation. I'm not powerful. You cannot taste me. You cannot feel me because you don't. You think that you can survive without me, but you can't, man. You think that, hey, it'll all be fine when we just treat each other like human beings. And what that says to me is, don't be yourself. Be like me. Keep me comfortable. Connect where I'm ready to connect. Come out to my place. Or maybe I'll come down and get some artifacts from your place. That is bullshit. When you say that your ethnicity is American, there is no American ethnicity. You had to throw away your ethnicity to become American. That's what it means. That's what it means. You give up who you are to become American. And you can pretend that it's okay because you're white. When we give up who we are to become American, we know that we're dying from it. You're dying from it too, but you don't know it necessarily. Get ethnic, you know? You know, I'm not going to trust you until you're as willing to be changed and affected by my experience and transformed by my experience as I am every day by yours. I attended a school for the first time that was predominantly white, and I had white teachers. And I walked into the classroom, and there were 3 reading groups in my 5th grade classroom, and I was promptly put into the lowest reading group. And I gathered very quickly that that was because I'm of African and American descent. Then they put me into the intermediate reading group, and then they put me into the highest reading group. And, you know, I just boiled and churned through the whole process because my reading level was higher than anything they had in the classroom. I'm always dealing with you. I'm always dealing with you. You don't deal with him. You don't deal with me. Maybe you had an opportunity to deal with some Latino people, but we always deal with you, baby. Always. Every day.
So that's the end of that 10-minute clip. This is, again, a 90-minute film. And what I wanted to do was to do a few polling questions to just get some initial reaction from everyone and how they felt about it. And Marissa's already got the first question up. Great. So the first question, did watching this series of film clips make you feel uncomfortable? I thought this might give us a spread of responses. So 39%, no, not at all. 9% a little uncomfortable. 30% somewhat uncomfortable. And 9% very uncomfortable. And 13% extremely uncomfortable. So I wasn't sure how the response would look, but I thought it might be fairly spread out. So that's interesting. So we're going to go to 2 more questions and related to the film, and then we're going to circle back to the privilege walk poll. So let's try the next question. So this one, I did mention the film is pretty old. It's 1994, so I want to know how relevant everybody thought it was to our current situation. And so we have about 13% probably relevant, and a very large majority, thinks like 80, can't quite see it, but 83% said absolutely relevant. So yeah, it's a dated film, but still seems very relevant. And so let's go to the last polling question. The film focused on 8 men. Do you think a film that focuses on white privilege and systemic racism from a female perspective would significantly add to our understanding? And again, I think the majority say absolutely critical, and 22% certainly. And I know that there are films available. We took the workshop, the Doing Our Own workshop. I'm pretty sure we saw a film that had all female participants in a similar kind of setting discussing racism. So those kinds of films are available. Are we ready to share results from the other poll?
So I guess the first question, we did not have an even, the very first question, we had about 2/3 of our group, 63% identify as white and 37% identified as a BIPOC. And so now the first set of questions are for those people. The first survey is from those individuals who identify as BIPOC. I don't know what happened to the text of the first question, but basically we're getting about anywhere from 0% some of these to 10% to as much as 70% on some of these. It is not often that individuals in the BIPOC said affirmative answers in these different questions. Now, if we can go to the group 2 questions, the audience that self-identified as white, and you can see it is a much higher frequency of occurrence where the issue of race, of skin color, is not identified as a factor. I don't have to speak on as a representative of my race group. I can worry about, I can apply for a job and not have to worry whether my race or my skin color will be a factor. And I guess I'll say, I think the pattern is very clear. Group 2, a very high percentage say, in essence, race doesn't matter on some of the things that impact my life. Whereas by contrast, the people who identify as BIPOC, many of them indicate that race does matter. And I guess to piggyback on what David had said, the film that you saw was from 1994, Color of Fear. The Peggy McIntosh article, which was entitled Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack of White Privilege, was actually published in 1989. And so these are approaches that were 25 years, well, in the 1989, almost 30 some years ago. The 1994 film, a little more than 25 years ago. And for most of the questions in the privilege walk, there still are dramatic differences between people who are white, people who are BIPOC, in terms of how much race is identified as a factor in things that happen in their life. And I think it's a bit of a, I mean, at one level, it's a very sad commentary that something that was 30 years ago, in terms of the first publication of this survey and this approach, there's really not a very earth-shaking difference. And I guess we kind of anticipated this. As I said before, if this is in a larger public setting, it's a little more visible, but I think just looking at the graphs on the percentage of individuals who identify, yes, race is a significant factor in things in my life versus the people who self-identify as white. Essentially, I will say, I don't think of race, of my race. I don't think of race very often. And it's something that I guess, I don't know how to grapple with that in my own life yet. I still struggle with it. But I think what we see is there's not been an awful lot of a change. And I think, I guess my take is I'm optimistic about some things, but I'm a little pessimistic about some things, because when this survey can continue to sort of be valid, if you will, 30 years after the fact, we have to wonder, are we doing the right things? And I think that's sort of the wrap on the survey. David, did you want to say anything more?
We in terms of the film clip, it's very moving to see the whole thing, and we actually have the DVDs for the college now. I guess for anybody who wants to find out what happens with the 8 men and their good discussion, they can maybe take a look at the videos. And these actually come with like a guide to facilitate discussion and so forth. But we were thinking actually that maybe we could hear from participants in this particular event, like how they felt about the poll, the white privilege poll, and the film clip, and maybe that would, sort of guide discussion. And I think if we're going to do that, I guess we need to stop recording.
Will do.
Okay.